Good afternoon, everyone. All right, so I'm doing the count of how many people I see and how many voices I heard. So we're going to do this one more time. Good afternoon, beautiful humans. Yes, that is the first part of what this entire lecture is going to be about, is showing up. And that's what a queer eye on dressing up and self-fashioning is. So thank you so much for spending your afternoon with me. Again, and thank you, Kristen, for that wonderful introduction. Again, my name's Theo Tyson. I'm the curator of fashion arts here. How many people have had an opportunity to see the dress up exhibition down the hall? Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And how many of you have seen it more than once? Thank you, that's a little job security. I appreciate that, I appreciate that. So one of the things that you encounter as soon as you walk into the exhibition, aside from those three gorgeous dresses, a Bob Mackie, a Gautier, and Alexander McQueen, a little bit of a queer blend as soon as you walk in, but it's that quote from RuPaul, "We're all born naked and the rest is drag." One of the things that I said as I was interviewing for the role that I have here is, how do you communicate? Like we're at this very historic, perhaps encyclopedic museum, you know, full of paintings and sculptures and all of this deep, rich scholarship. Why are we talking about fashion? Who cares? Why does fashion matter? And what I mentioned to Matthew Teitelbaum, our director, I was like, well, neither one of us showed up naked today is the thing. And furthermore, what influenced our self-fashioning? What influenced how you got dressed this morning? What influenced you to put something on, or perhaps even to take something off? What were you thinking about? Fashion, much like identity, is a constructed methodology of communication. It's one of the ways that we're able to speak to people without saying a word. Fashion and jewelry give us the ability to transform, project, and perform our identities. Did everyone get one of the handouts on their way in? So we're going to start there, just so we're grounded. I don't want to do a full history lecture sort of situation, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And again, I appreciate you being here, so I'm going to agree. Again, we all put on clothes. We have a similar interest in the way that fashion and jewelry are able to offer communication. But how did this turn into something that belongs in a museum context? What are we thinking about? What are we talking about? For me, this started with my thesis exhibition at the Savannah College of Art and Design in Atlanta. My very first museum job was at the SCAD-FASH Museum of Fashion and Film in Atlanta. And that was after a 20-year career doing something completely different, but very much adjacent. My career in retail as a stylist and in entertainment was about helping people self-fashion and create their identities. Part of that came from confidence. And if any of us know anything about a drag queen, they exude confidence. They show up as their full selves all of the time. But what does that mean in a scholarly context? So there's another version of this bibliography that has over 60 titles on it, and I edited it. But I wanted to offer you in this handout an annotated bibliography. So not just the text that I was reading, but what I was gleaning from it. So you'll see a couple of words underneath each text. The language of fashion, for example, and what I got from Roland Barthes in regards to the semiotics of fashion. Rebecca Arnold is someone that's not cited here, and thinking about fashion from a psychological standpoint. One of the things that I learned studying luxury at SCAD was the way that people think about the way that they show up in the world and the impact that that can have and the intentions behind the impact that is wanted. So again, as you kind of go through that bibliography, and hopefully that gives you just a little bit of a glimpse into some of the things that I was thinking about and what I was reading and how I came to this lineup of images that you see. I think the one on the left is pretty recognizable, our Dear Dear Prince. And we talk about gender bending. When I arrived to Boston 5 years ago, in 2019, my predecessor, Michelle Fenimore, was then the Penny Bennett curator of fashion arts and produced an amazing exhibition called Gender Bending Fashion. Fashion had the ability to change the way that we labeled our restrooms here in this institution and thinking about our humanity first instead of our gender or our sex or our identities or our interest. Because when it comes down to it, we all go, right? And we just want a place to go. So one of the things that I shared very recently in that same vein is fashion is much more about our shared humanity than it is about any individual vanity. Fashion is more about our shared humanity than it is our individual vanity. The latter is relevant to the economy, right? Capitalism, consumerism, who's influencing and informing, do we need to buy? And if we need to buy, what do we buy? Who do we buy it from? When do we get to wear it? That was one of the reasons for Dress Up, is offering people an opportunity and a brave space to be their full selves. With that in mind, imagine how photographs of current and recent generations will be understood in 100 years. And here, and I might be dating myself a little bit, because a lot of these images are from my youth. You know, we're looking at David Bowie and Prince and Grace Jones. But these were queer icons before that was a terminology. These were people that appealed to everyone through their medium. Most of it was music, but remember, before radio killed the video star, we watched them perform their identities. We watched them offer a very particular type of vulnerability and expression in the way that they dressed. I start with that staple element of costume. And again, you are looking at these images here, and all of them have a bit of a suiting element to them. Suiting is something that has been understood as a uniform. Costume is French for suit and a staple element of dressing. It's something that we've seen across queer histories. Cross-dressing on both sides of the binary. And the white shirt offers an abundance of semiotics, but for my thesis, which is where these images came from and what I used as a foundation, truly focused on gender. I'm gonna offer a shameless plug for another exhibition that I have upstairs called For Women, New Musings of Blackness that Kristen mentioned, where the artist C. Rose Smith took that moment and started thinking about what a single garment could mean for queering fashion and challenging identity and thinking about what it meant to use a single garment of clothing as a mode of resistance, assimilation, and triumph. So again, the history, telling you how I got to talking about fashion in a queer context. As we look at this image, this was the signature image for my thesis exhibition, Performing Fashion's Senseless Acts of Gender. A lot of people thought this was me. My stomach has not been that flat in a long time, y'all. That is, however, my white shirt. This was the reason I chose this image was because of its ambiguity. And although my research, again, the annotated bibliography that you have in the handout is mostly from the 20th century, this idea of what it means to dress as a man or as a woman started long before that. So this is just, again, I share with you kind of a snapshot of what I was looking at, and a crux of like starting from when color started to be assigned and reassigned. Do all of us know that pink was originally a color for masculinity? How many of you knew that? How many of you knew that heels were originally for men? Okay, y'all did your homework and understood the assignment. I'm here for it. I like it. So that notwithstanding, we still are following constructs of what it means to dress, of what it means to self-fashion, public and personal identities. The current phenomenon of gender reveals really speaks to the expectations associated with those very, very early designations of the intention of a particular performance of a human being's determined genitalia, and that genitalia being a guiding force in someone's life. Thinking about nomenclature, thinking about what your touchstone is. So if someone tells you you are a boy, you are a girl, sure, but what does that mean? Now it means that, okay, someone gender reveal, the balloon pops blue. All of a sudden this person gets, the suits. They get the sporting, attire. This is what happens. If you're a girl, all of a sudden it's like you play with dolls. My Barbies rode in Tonka trucks. Like, there's a both and. And one of the things that is very important to me, and I'm so grateful for in my position here at the museum, is the ability to have these conversations. And here we're looking at a group photograph of our 25 participants of the MFA teen program and their mentors, and my co-curator to the far right with the gorgeous strawberry blonde hair, Emily Stower, the curator of jewelry, who we worked on Dress Up together. And as we were going through the planning of this, we're looking at jewelry, we're looking at, adult clothing, if you will, and we invited the teens in, and we were asking them, what does it mean to you to dress up? And they said words like freedom, individuality, advancement, aspiration. And we were like, great, that's what we want to show. And then we showed them some of the images that you'll see later and some that you won't, because we had to do some severe editing for the exhibition. They were like, we don't see anything queer. I'm like, okay, we hear you. What does queer look like? I want to take this moment to, if someone wants to offer what queer looks like to them, but also just a quick 7 seconds to conjure in your mind what queer looks like. Let's go back to that original quote by RuPaul. We're all born naked and the rest is drag. So that means it's all kind of queer, right? This whole system, this whole construction of societal identities based on clothing and dress is inherently queer. It's also inherently patriarchal. So I think about what it means when we dress up and what we're educating others on and the cues that they're picking up on. The particular teen in the top right corner, whose name I won't say because they are a youth, I watched them grow. They've been in our teen program for a year. I watched them bloom into their full self, being confident to wear whatever they wanted to, not to challenge the establishment, but to critique the establishment. Again, using fashion as a method of assimilation, but also resistance. And when you go into the exhibit, if you haven't been there already, you'll see these amazing photos. And on the left, you'll see our photographer engaging with our teens for this experience that they asked for. They asked for a modality of expression, and that modality of expression came from queerness. One of the things that happens when you're working with teens, like I said before, is they will date you and tell you that you are out of touch and out of style. There are some things in the exhibition that are clearly from the 70s that resonate with me that they don't get. I am not going to make any judgments, but I am hoping that there's a good portion of you that can ride with me on this one. Let's talk about Halston. Can we talk about Halston? And we know the 70s and Studio 54. Like, can I just get like a little, like just pinky up, just a little? Okay, we're on the same page, great. So we think about, again, what does it look like to be queer? And I started off talking about drag queens. But look at these sleek lines. Look at this level of elegance and sophistication. And think about the stereotypes and tropes that are associated with being queer and how we're expected to show up. Think about that as a public performance that might not necessarily be representative of your personal identity. Halston was a very openly queer individual. One of his muses and one of his partners was Elsa Peretti. Putting this in the exhibition wasn't just about the timeless style of this gorgeous, absolutely stunning jersey dress that has just the most amazing side boob, y'all, like the seaming and the craftsmanship. I wish I could. But thinking about that and thinking about the fact that he made these dresses for everyone. He made this at a time when people were striving for expression, craving a modality of identity. Again, I mentioned Studio 54 for a reason. It wasn't just the DJs. It wasn't just the social component. It was the ability to express yourself and be who you are. In moving from the 70s to the 80s, throughout the exhibition, you'll see quotes along the wall. My co-curator, Emily, and I offered those as a means of grounding to help you kind of think about what we were thinking about and hopefully inform you and contextualize the objects that you were seeing and give more meaning to the labels that we so painstakingly wrote. This one is by Amanda Gorman. Fashion is its own form of language, its own form of rhetoric. How many of you would agree with that? How many of you have ever heard in your academic endeavors fashion mentioned as a meaningful way of expressing yourself? Not as many hands. Not as many hands. But fashion can indeed do that. On your left, you see the HIV/AIDS ribbon, a simple grosgrain red ribbon and safety pin. But when fashioned in a particular way, perhaps on someone's lapel, at an award ceremony, it's an incredible means of communication. That red ribbon was conceived by costume designer Mark Happel and distributed by Visual Aids. The red grosgrain ribbon, looped and secured to a lapel or a blouse with a simple safety pin, became a powerful symbol of support for those suffering from HIV and AIDS during the 80s and 90s. In 1991, Visual AIDS Artists Caucus members hosted ribbon bees. Think about a sewing bee or like a quilting guild. Transforming them into a means of public awareness, particularly after celebrities wore them and they were televised. And again, think about the timing. Think about fashion in the context of zeitgeist. This is when we're getting into the era where it's still before social media, but everything is televised. And people were televised wearing these red ribbons on the red carpet at the Tony Awards. So back when there was little public discourse about the disease, think about ACT UP, think about silence, think about the impact that silence can have. This pin demonstrated public support for those with HIV and their caregivers. HIV and AIDS disproportionately affected males in this country. Their caretakers were predominantly lesbians of all varieties, of all backgrounds. This became an educational opportunity to follow questions like, what is that, and why are you wearing that? So we think about, why are you wearing what you're wearing? How did you make that decision? Why did you make that decision? Here we're looking at a piece that is really, really special to me. Dress Up is predominantly a show of the MFA's collection. With that being said, it allowed us to look at some of the absented presence in our collection. Who has been represented and how? We think about the labels that exist in the museum textually, but we also think about the way that we read body language. We read fashion in the very same way. Here we're looking at a photo by Donna Summer, a New York-based photographer, the Dragon Sisters, beautiful queer sisters, on the stoop of a set of stairs in New York that are giving a little bit of the Met Museum, but that requires a permit. So they're here, and they're here making a statement on America, on what it means to be an American. I had an amazing conversation yesterday afternoon about intersectionality. I don't suspect that everyone here is queer, but I most certainly know that everyone here is human and that you got dressed this morning. And I also know with certainty that there has been an influence, consciously or subconsciously, of someone queer that either told you yes or no in regards to what you put on your body. So let's think about being an American. I'm a military kid. I'm a patriot. I sent my father off to war on Christmas Eve when I was 14. I wore the yellow ribbon, I wore the red ribbon, I wore all the patriotic ribbons and flags and all of those things. But if you type in All American on Google, especially with the advent of AI, again, take a minute. If you type in All American on Google, do you think you will get a visual of a queer person? Do you think you would get a visual of a person of color? Add that to intersectionality. We are looking at the Dragon Sisters in 12 United States flags sewn by hand by Timothy Westbrook. The underpinning of one of them is the French flag. Think about the Statue of Liberty. How many of you know that the Statue of Liberty is a Black woman? How many of you knew that? Think about the way that histories are written and how we dress them up and how we take that on and what it means to be an American. So in this identity politics section, we are challenging notions of identity. So you will definitely see queerness, and I know that's what this talk is about, but you'll also see representations of nationalism from Alexander McQueen. You'll also see indigenous representations from the Vanderhoop family and Karina Emmerich. Intersectionality matters. Again, what does a queer person look like? The little black dress. The little black dress is a canvas. Again, I'm gonna date myself. How many of you remember Dynasty? Dallas, Young and the Restless. Those icons. Who do you think influenced them? Those shoulder pads, those power suits, that sense of androgyny, right? I see some nodding. We're going back to that, like, and Victor still looks good, y'all. I'm sorry. Victor still looks good from Young and the Restless. Queer influences are everywhere. Again, there's a segment in the exhibition with Madonna. What is one of her biggest hits? Vogue. We all know the history of voguing and where that came from. And whether it has been clearly identified or not, it has always been a buttress and a touchstone for what is popular, what the zeitgeist goes to. And the black dress has been a canvas for that. And here we have a quote from one of our amazing queer icons, Andre Leon Talley. "The zenith of elegance in any woman's wardrobe is the little black dress, the power of which suggests dash and refinement." First of all, we should use dash in our, our everyday language more often. But this flamboyancy, this idea of extravagance and individuality are hallmarks of queer style, a level of expression that often seems to escape the general population, but is ever present. The black dress is a canvas for that. And there are, again, looking at this platform, you can't identify the queer designers from the non-queer designers because it doesn't actually matter. What matters is the sense of self-expression and freedom that is offered through clothing and dress. And speaking about Patrick Kelly, an exceptionally beautiful black queer man from Vicksburg, Mississippi, from the South, the Bible Belt, and what it meant for him to be able to offer fashion, clothing, and dress as a means of freedom and expression, and also as a means of success. His joy and exuberance, as you see here on the left, this is one of the few loans in Dress Up, on loan graciously from the Peabody Essex Museum, and you can see it here on the right in his ad. Patrick Kelly was about love. That's what queer fashion is. That's what queering fashion is. It's loving yourself and allowing people to love themselves and express that, and our ability to share in that, but not without talent and craftsmanship. If you go into the exhibition, this is very intentionally positioned betwixt and between Chanel. Chanel was also a very queer individual. Chanel infamously showed up in 1906 and caused quite a stir at a horse race when she borrowed one of her lover's suits. There was not a language for queer then, but the language was fashion. That's how she expressed that she wanted something different for herself, and in doing so, gave others permission to do something different. I want to be very cognizant of the fact that Chanel is problematic in other ways. I have no authority over the truth, and multiple things can be true at the same time. She did do something for us in regards to offering people an ability to express themselves and what that meant to kind of create that signature look that communicated to others who you were and who you wanted to be. Remember, fake it until you make it? Chanel helped to pioneer that. And of course, to her left, you see Marlene Dietrich, another queer icon. Think about androgyny. We talked about costume, suit, that equivalent of the two. What does it mean to put on a uniform? A uniform of status, a uniform of gender, a uniform of sexuality and identity. And what does it mean to challenge that and use clothing to do so? Oscar Wilde, another amazing queer icon, one of the original dandies, that said one should either be a work of art or wear a work of art. How many of you would agree with that sentiment? Yeah, that's how you justify that purchase, right? I need this. This amazing photograph by Henry Cartier-Bresson shows a woman in the act of self-fashioning. I make no determinations as to whether or not this woman may or may not be queer, but I can make an assertion to her intentionality of self-fashioning and understanding that she has power over her identity. I worked in retail for quite some time. I have fitting room chronicles for days I could share with you. But all of us go through this in some way. You went through it this morning before you got here. Whether you put on a t-shirt and shorts, a suit, a dress, it doesn't matter. You went through this thought process of how am I going to show up today? Imagine doing that and not just showing up for yourself, but as a queer person, showing up for an entire community and having an expectation based on the way that you dress, that that's how everyone else that shares certain sentiments with you might dress. And if you don't show up that way, what does that mean? I've asked a lot about what does it mean to dress like a queer person, but what's the opposite of that case study? How do you dress like a straight person? They're clothing items. It's a hat, it's a dress, it's a pair of pants. One of the things that I had mentioned that I would share with you is how this shows up in our exhibition making and our process, our collecting strategy. We are looking at the way that we label things. I think we could all agree that this appears to be a woman holding a handbag in this photograph. Is that fair? So generations from now, when we search this particular object, are you going to search this as a woman's handbag or just a handbag? Is it a woman's dress or is it simply a dress? One of the things that Dress Up allowed us to do was go shopping and make some new acquisitions. This is not something that we take lightly. The museum invests in our vision, and our supporters invest in our vision and allow us to acquire these objects so that we can share stories. Not tell stories, because they're not ours, but share stories. Again, another quote, style has become very important, the whole idea of style, what your personal style is. It's your identity. That's Patricia Field. How many of you know who Patricia Field is? Does that name sound familiar to anyone? So the costume designer for Sex and the City, originally an HBO series, starring Sarah Jessica Parker as Carrie Bradshaw. These shoes, which I have found in multiple tours through Dress Up, even when people have not watched that series, they know these shoes. So the moment that these shoes are applicable in Sex and the City is exceptionally heteronormative. It is, and sorry if this is a spoiler for anyone, but these shoes are used in lieu of an engagement ring at the moment where one character is proposing to another, and the value that is placed on these shoes. That's a whole nother story that we can talk about. We can also talk about the color blue. We won't go into a Devil Wears Prada diatribe right now. When we acquired these shoes, yes, there's a particular story that we can share with them. They are visually beautiful. This is the Blue Hungisi by Manolo Blahnik. But they are uniquely displayed in Dress Up next to another pair of Manolo Blahniks that are a size 36. Small, kind of petite shoe. What you would expect from a particular type of woman. The ones that we purchased that you see here are drag queen size. These are some of the subtle ways that we can influence the conversation on clothing and dress with our collecting and acquisitions. So you can look at this and say to yourself, this is a pair of women's shoes, but the size will challenge that. And I hope that it will challenge you to think about who else could wear this shoe? And why does my brain immediately go to this is a woman's shoe? Dolly Parton, y'all. It's hard to be a diamond in a rhinestone world. It's hard to be queer in a super straight world. There's a time-based media piece on view right now by the artist Shaniqua Gay called The Crooked Room that talks about trying to set yourself upright. There's a commentary by Melissa Paris Harry from CNBC that like those rides at Universal Studios where, you know, they shake you around and put you in a blender and then they tell you to like, read this, like sit up straight immediately. It's kind of what it's like to be a Black woman in America. And then you get the pulse button because I'm a Black queer woman in America. There's something additional. It's challenging to show up as your full self. But that's why we have sequins and sparkles. And we have people that show up with us and for us that offer inspiration. We're looking at Donna Summer on our left. How many of you knew that Donna Summer was from Mission Hill? Right? Donna Summer was a star. Donna Summer herself was not queer, but she showed up in a way that allowed queer people to feel empowered by her words and simply by her presence. One of the things that we're working on here at the museum is offering more representation. And again, part of that is through our collecting strategy, and some of that is going to be through our mannequins. One of the things that I thought about was, what could it mean? I just talked about how we label objects in our collection as you're perhaps searching for something. And we wouldn't do this with Donna Summer because, you know, this dress was actually worn by her. This is a pre-fall 2010 Valentino dress. J-Lo wore it, but we won't get into the who wore it best. Donna Summer wore this, you can see here on your left, and there's actually a YouTube video that still exists of her performing in this dress in 2011 in Switzerland for Art on Ice, which was just a year before she passed away. And so you have this star and someone that could sparkle. Let's roll this back to drag queens and dressing up in Studio 54 and thinking about what influences, what allows someone to just express themselves to their fullest. Like, we don't need to go through Donna Summer's greatest hits, but what could it have meant for me to put this dress on a mannequin that was deemed male. Thinking about these acquisitions that we were able to make with such generous support from our sponsors and supporters, there's something about looking at this very existentially. Like, this is something outside of me. Like, maybe you're the queer friend in your group. Maybe you're starting to think about the fact that you don't have any queer friends in your group. You should fix that. When we think about the community of the MFA and inviting people in and here all belong, that's not just visitorship. That's not just our audiences. That's our collection. That's when you go to our site and search and want to find something that makes you feel seen. And again, even as we go through and label, who are labels for? Did I really need to stand here in front of you and tell you that I was a Black queer woman? How necessary was that? Is it necessary for us to ascribe pink to a gender or a personality trait? Thom Solo is an amazing, absolutely amazing shoe designer. Based in Boston, he lives in Newton, studied architecture at the School of Museum of Fine Arts just across the way. One of the things that he and I talk about, and I am so delighted that we were able to acquire the glass slipper that you see on your right, his investment in himself and in the queer community offered us these amazing glass slippers with 20,000 Swarovski crystals each that he painstakingly applied over 96 hours. As a prototype for another queer icon that shall remain nameless, I think you can tell by the silhouette who that might be. But being able to invest in an individual that will invest in our queer community. And again, thinking about what it means to be able to have particular conversations in this encyclopedic space, in this space of discourse. You'll see several other shoes. And this array that you see here, the first four, the one on the far right is actually a Judith Lieber, this adorable Finch purse. You got to see that too. But these 4 pairs of shoes really can offer us like a kind of guided dinner conversation, if you will, on a spectrum of expectation of what it means to put a queer lens on dressing up. The far left, another pair of Manolo Blahniks, a little bit different, lower heel, bit more manageable, worn by Donna Summer. The glass slipper that I just shared, designed by Thom Solo. And then there's this beautiful pink sugar ombre slipper that for the most part, people can only imagine it being worn by a drag queen. That's not because that's who it was designed for. That's because that's what constructs of society and patriarchy have offered us. And then to the right of that is this absolutely adorable, softer Emma Hope kitten heel. Emma Hope is a designer out of the UK and London. One of the things that I remember talking to one of my mentors about in a very decidedly queer conversation is, you would think that queer people don't get old. Like, where are my 77-year-old lesbians? Like, where are those people at? Because let's just be very honest, ankles and knees are different after a certain age, so we're not wearing the pink sugar ombre platforms. But we are indeed still fabulous, and we do still indeed want to have a means of expression. Again, there has to be some sort of middle ground, some sort of balance that allows people to simply be who they are in the theater of everyday life. The last quote that I will share with you, and I will not speak for the entirety of a community, but I will absolutely speak for myself when I tell you that fashion is the armor that I use to survive the reality of everyday life. Thank you.
We have mics on either side of the auditorium for Q&A, if you'll raise your hand.
That's the amazing voice of Paige.
Right here.
At what point in the assemblage of this exhibit did the teens comment come out, but what here, there's nothing here that's queer, and what is your answer to that? What was your answer to that?
Thank you. This course was my answer to that. The teens came in at the point that we were working with design and laying the exhibition out. So I work with the teens on a consistent basis on very different things, and I shared this exhibition with them, and we were like, let's do more, let's go further. And so we went into the exhibition space that it's in now. Matthew Wong was there at the time. And we walked through and told them kind of what was going to be where. And, you know, they actively listened and took it in. And they questioned a queer presence. And I told them that they were right, that there was an absence. And I told them that we are in need of a way to do that. Again, thinking about our existing collection and opportunities for developing our collection strategy and furthering our acquisition intent. They came in at that moment where we still had the ability to affect their influence on the exhibition. So when you go in that teen spirit section right in front of the selfie station, they did that. That was all because of their voice, and we didn't really have street photography. We didn't have this like kind of carefree ideation of what it meant to self-fashion. And we worked with a local partner like a gallery to bring that to life. So in regards to time, it's a little bit fuzzy, but they showed up at the exact right moment where we could actually take their voice and put it in action in the museum. Thank you. And if anyone needs me to go back to a particular slide, just let me know.
The terms that you use with the word queer, depending on demographics and age and where you're from or what circle you travel in, can you define the term queer?
I can.
And is it a common term that's used in a positive way?
Language is not static.
Right.
And so I don't mean to
No, I
presume
understand.
your question, but people can hear that very differently.
Of course.
And one of the reasons that we decided on that particular term is because of the expansiveness of it, because it allowed us to ask questions. That's one of the reasons that we rested on queer and didn't say that, well, this is the gay part of the show, and this is the lesbian part of the show, or this is the bisexual or pansexual, or however you want it to, or trans part of the show. The intention with using the language of queer is as the most simplistic separation from a particular heteronormative patriarchy. That's the way in which we're using and asserting queer.
So it's inclusive.
Yes.
And does it mean unique or unusual or out of the ordinary? I'm a little bit confused
It can still be derogatory on a particular tongue. But as we are using it, as I am using it today, it is meant to be inclusive, and it is not meant to say someone is out of the ordinary. I would argue that we're extraordinary. It's a way of just acknowledging that there are a particular group of people that have been relegated to a particular space, and we just want to offer context to that's the voice that we're giving in this conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm hopeful that the grandchildren I have are saying this mantra, which is, you do you. You do you. Whether it's purple hair or green hair or tattoos or jewelry or fashion, it seems like this is a good way to be.
I would agree with you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for this. I'm wondering if there's any way for you or anybody on the team to take this presentation out to high schools, middle schools, because this is just what should be happening. And thank you so much.
No, thank you. I'm going to look at Kristen Hoskins, who's over our amazing public programs. No, but we also have an amazing learning and community engagement team. We have our MFA Pathways internship program. Again, the teen program that's over 25 teens. I'm speaking at the German International School on Friday. I've been into the Windsor School, Boston Arts Academy. Within the hours that are given to me in the day, I do as much as I possibly can and welcome invitations to do more. Because this really is, to the question prior, this is about inclusivity beyond that determination of othering and just it being kind of, you should be able to see yourself in every space. That's why we say here all belong, because we do.
I think we're going to see if there's other questions in the room. We definitely, to add to what Theo had just mentioned, you know, we have a very robust groups visit program, and so we have people from all across the city come into our museum with guided visits, with our very, very educated volunteers that bring them through the spaces, and so we try our best. There's certainly, I mean, our curators do an amazing job of getting out into the community also, and with a lot of the focus on coming here to see the objects in person and be able to immerse themselves in the spaces and the amazing spaces that Theo has created among our other curators. So are there other questions for Theo today? All right, thank you so much for joining us, and a huge thank you to Theo.